Resuming debate, the Honourable Member for Bay of Quinte.
Madam Speaker, today the government is printing and spending money at a rate never seen before in our nation's history. This is plain. Never before has this government spent so much so quickly. Not just during the pandemic, Madam Speaker, but the Liberal government from 2015 to 2019 borrowed $100 billion when, in the 2015 election, the Prime Minister had promised small, incremental deficits and a balanced budget in 2019. During the pandemic, Canada has borrowed more money than in its 155 years combined through 23 Prime Ministers. This year alone, the government printed $300 billion. And where did this money go? Well, it's simple. Just like a Will Smith slap, it was gone. It spent a lot of money, little investment. After $800 billion spent in the last 6 years, we do not have any more ICU or hospital beds that would help future pandemics, allow much-needed surgeries to have taken place, or stave off any more unneeded lockdowns. Our military is in shambles, and we need new equipment, more investment in Arctic defense, and our Navy. We have a broken immigration system to which we cannot currently fill more than 1 million jobs in this country that need to be filled in order for businesses to grow, businesses that pay salaries and payroll taxes, corporate taxes, generate GDP that contribute to federal taxes, and make the stuff that will hopefully quell inflation. We have the biggest single housing crisis in the world with a growing homeless population. We have an outdated and lacking innovation strategy in this country. Not only are we losing immigration, other countries are poaching our talent here at home. We have not invested as much as we need in R&D, and we are not seeing IP and patents generated as well as other countries. And we cannot get our Canadian energy, whether that be from Keystone XL or especially LNG, to Europe and the rest of the world at a time when it has to buy it still from Russia and Putin to fuel his war machine that is devastating Ukraine. It's quite simple, Madam Speaker. By having a government spend rather than invest has put Canada on a race to the bottom, and we are headed for more disaster the more that we fail to invest in Canada, our children, and our future, and continue to spend to satisfy today. And by spending and not investing, it's Canadians who are hurting. Canadians like my constituents of Bay of Quinte who are having trouble pinching loonies and toonies together to pay for groceries, heat, and to put gas into their fuel tanks. You know, they also have an incredible debt load that's compiling of their own. Did you know that in the G7, we have the worst personal debt in all of those nations for our families in this country, who are racking up lines of credit and credit card bills and putting a lot of money on themselves, just the same as the government is. The result is higher interest payments for them, payday loans that they can't get out of, and having to decide how to pay bills this month and next. They're having trouble because the money spent may have been cheap, it may have been easy, but that easy and cheap cash is fueling inflation as more money chases less goods. Points that have been made clear, Madam Speaker, in this side of the House again and again. We are heading for more spending with the NDP and Liberal merger, and where spending is concerned, when you put the NDP and the Liberals together, well, you haven't seen anything yet. You see, there's a saying that goes, money is only important when you don't have any, and neither the Liberal or NDP governments believe we're out of it. Never mind that the clock is ticking. Literally, the national debt clock is fast approaching $1.2 trillion. But hey, what's a trillion anymore? We certainly know $1 million for a house is nothing anymore. Well, a couple of statistics, Madam Speaker. That's $31,000 per man, woman, and child in Canada. For a family of 5, that's $155,000 that they now owe for the debt in Canada. When we look at what we're borrowing every day we're printing $391 million to cover the debt that this country needs to pay its bills today. And when we look at what's eclipsed and what are the interest payments for the debt, what does it cost us to pay for the debt? Well, it's now $40 billion. When you think about investments, you know, wouldn't it be nice to have $40 billion more for health care, to create more beds and ICU beds and doctors and nurses, and to make sure we had everything that Canadians need just to have that universal basic income that we so pride ourselves in? And, well, the Liberal NDP merger is said to give fits to the finance minister because the already outlandish spending is set to increase oh so very much more. Universal basic income, free pharmacare, free dental care, and on and on. You can imagine that perhaps even Oprah Winfrey will make an appearance in this house herself. You get a car, you get a car, everyone's just going to get a car. Madam Speaker, there's far more important saying. Success is where preparation and opportunity meet. For our investments for a better tomorrow, for our children, for our children's children, we need to learn the difference between spending and investing and make sure we invest in Canada's future. And here's the kicker, Madam Speaker. Some of that investment may actually be free. Number one, we need to stop the spending spree. There will be a windfall for the federal government this year from, wait from it, you know what the windfalls will be from? Oil. Alberta itself may be able to balance its books for the first time post-pandemic. The federal government needs to put some of that money into debt repayment, and while we have too many problems to put the brakes on spending, it needs to be spent more wisely than ever before. Number two, we have to grasp that we cannot have everything. If we're going to make Canadians choose between groceries and rent, then we must choose those investments with extreme caution. Canadians choosing whether to put their kids into hockey or swimming know that they can't have everything. They need to make choices. The government needs to make choices as well. Number three, we need to invest into Canada's strengths that will provide a return on investment. Housing includes working with the provinces to double our building of new starts. It includes increasing our skilled trades in Canada by investing in our immigration system. It's terrible that right now across Canada we can't fill 1 million jobs, and that when the immigration minister talked about this, he said, well, it's broken. We're putting $85 million into it, and we're not sure if we're going to have many skilled laborers at all coming into this country by the end of the year. And every minute that we wait to fulfill these companies and they sit empty or not being able to produce things that provide money for this country, we are failing those businesses and we're failing Canada to be able to make money on its own and quell inflation. You know, we need to look at food production in Canada. Now that Ukraine and Russia have decreased theirs. Ukraine provides over 20% of the world's wheat, 9% of the world's corn. A bigger problem for Canadian agriculture is that 80% of fertilizer currently comes from Russia. And that 80% of fertilizer is nitrate, which helps us grow our corn. If we're out of nitrate and we don't have that fertilizer, well, we're in big trouble in order to produce that food that we need not only for our own country, but for across the world. The simple solution may be to ask farmers to produce 10% more this year to ensure that we are making our own fertilizer, ensure we're helping farmers as much as we can produce the things they need to feed the world and feed Canadians. And you know, we have to increase our output of Canadian energy, especially our energy and nuclear energy modular units. You know, Canadian oil is much better than unethical oil from parts of the globe, and as we make it cleaner, we should be promoting it more steadily. When it comes to GDP, few Canadians know that after real estate and manufacturing, mining, gas, and oil comes third, providing 585,000 jobs and over $190 billion in direct and indirect taxes a year. In comparison, a country that I really love is South Korea, the size of the rock of Newfoundland, which has the same GDP as Canada, has manufacturing and innovation replaced those oil and gas revenues that Canada enjoys. But innovation and manufacturing is worth almost 3 times what Canada does. So if we're going to start replacing that, we need to increase innovation, we need to increase manufacturing. When we look at South Korea and we look at the examples they provide, they have Hyundai, they have LG, they have Samsung, things that Canada needs to start investing in if we want to ever start bringing in those royalties, the GDP, the jobs, and to start investing into Canada and Canadians and start paying for the things that we want. And as Deputy Critic for Innovation, Science and Industry, I would hope that for Canada's future, we look at this kind of investment in order for Canada to succeed in the future. Jim Baselli was in the SRSR committee this week talking about what Canada needs to do in order to start capitalizing on intellectual property and to ensure we have an advanced and growing economy. Did you know that the OECD has predicted that Canada, and from 2020 to 2030, the next 3 decades after, is going to have the worst performing economy of all the OECD? It's absolutely deplorable, and we have to ensure now we're investing. We have to fix this economy and get to the future. Simply, Madam Speaker, the struggle Canadians are going through today, the inflation, the housing crisis, we have to invest in Canada's tomorrow. The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, Madam Speaker. The second best time is now. Let's invest in Canadians, let's invest in Canada, and let's get going to the future.
Questions and comments. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. You know, I listened with great interest to this member talk about Canada's GDP. Canada has the best GDP amongst the G7 countries right now. We're actually better positioned to come out of this last 2 years of the pandemic as a result of having the best debt to GDP ratio is what I'm referring to. So we're actually in the best position to come out of the problems that we've had over the last 2 years. But my question to this member is more specifically with respect to his comment about investing in new technologies. I couldn't agree with him more. We need to do more right now to make sure that we get those new technologies in Canada so that we become exporters of that technology. I don't see a lot of new technology when it relates to oil and gas, Madam Speaker. The Conservative Party of Canada refers to anything energy related as oil and gas being the only options. Would this member not agree with me that there are a lot of potential and opportunity in renewables and sustainable development as technology that we can start exporting throughout the world?
The Honourable Member for Bay of Quinte.
And thank you for the member for his intervention and my neighbor down the road in the 401. I have to agree there are technologies, but actually I disagree. We have technologies in oil and gas. You know, we have carbon capture elements that are in the oil sands right now that are doing an incredible job. Ontario is launching small modular nuclear reactors, which is emission-free, right? And we're looking at many different things. LNG, if we could do what the Ontario Liberals did 20 years ago with LNG in China, we could reduce the world's emissions by up to 50%, Madam Speaker. So, you know, we have great Canadian energy and renewables, and we need to look at also the oil and gas sector. It's really important. Thank you.
Député de Mirabel.
The Honourable Member from Mirabel. You know, I've never seen the federal government start encroaching an area of jurisdiction of Quebec and then back out. I think that by encroaching on this area of jurisdiction, the government is starting to invade our taxation jurisdiction, and without taking into account our fiscal jurisdiction. Does my colleague think that the government should pull out of this last exclusive area of jurisdiction?
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker, and to my honourable colleague from Quebec. You know, I do believe in jurisdiction where the federal government should stay in its lane and the provinces stay in theirs. You know, the federal government's job is to help the provinces ensure that they're being successful, that they have the resources they need, and that we're moving in the right directions. Making money and having taxation because they're responsible for their needs and the government should be responsible in theirs. So absolutely, I do agree. Let's just keep the federal government moving on ensuring it's doing best to invest in Canada and that the provinces do the same for their constituents. Thank you.
Honourable Member for Victoria.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Conservatives are often talking about government spending, but they don't talk a lot about government revenue, and fiscal responsibility requires us to think about both. Yet the Liberals and the Conservatives have voted against a wealth tax. They voted against taxing the biggest corporations. They vote against making sure the wealthiest pay their fair share. Why do the Conservatives continue to talk about cutting programs for the most vulnerable and protecting the profits of the wealthiest?
For Bay of Quinte.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and to my honourable colleague for the intervention. You know, I'm a Conservative as a business owner as well, so I not only sign the back of a check, I can sign the front of a check. And I know a couple things. Number one, businesses, when given extra taxes, find ways to pass those down to consumers. And what we really want to do is, I'm not saying we cut any programs for the vulnerable. I'm just saying we have different programs that increase the GDP and increase the tax that Canada has to pay for those programs. I don't think we need to be wastefully spending, causing more inflation for those programs. We need to find ways to generate that, and that means investing in Canadians, investing in Canadian businesses. They then pay taxes, and that pays for the rest of it. Thank you very much.
Member for Northumberland, Peterborough South.
Thank you, and I might say that the member from Grasslands his family's a very attractive and very nice group. And I also want to say, you know, we've heard a lot from this side about climate change, but given the fact that emissions have increased every year the last 7 years, isn't it just a bunch of hot air?
For Bay of Quinte in 10 seconds or less.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. You know, we had some great plans in the last election that talked about consumers having choices that better their backyard. You know, people want to buy electric cars. They want to be able to choose different forms of energy to heat their homes. But right now, when you go to the gas station, you only get the one choice, right? You can purchase electric cars that are expensive, and we're not making Canadian cars in Canada. Canadians need to be able to make choices. They want to better the environment, and we always believed, let's help them make those choices. Thank you.